pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with my final thoughts on Can You Forgive Steve Donoghue read-along. I have just a couple hours ago finished the fourth and final chunk of Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her? I love this novel. I had some problems with this novel, but this was a 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad Steve suggested it and led us all through it, because it was just a deeply gratifying experience for me, and I hope that I can follow along with Steve as he goes through the Palliser novels. I don't know if I want to read them as frequently as he might want to do the read-alongs, but we'll see how that goes. But I am certainly hooked on following the exploits of these characters. I understand that not a lot of them carry through. I am assuming that Plantagenet, Palliser, Plantipal, and Lady Glencora will carry through, but from what I thought maybe he said, or I've kind of picked up along the way, the Vavasors kind of disappear, maybe. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I forgot to bring the stupid piece of paper with my notes on it, so I had one longer quote, and I'll patch it in from home, but I think I can remember everything that I wanted to say. What I found most fascinating, and maybe I was aware of it before I got to the fourth and final chunk, but it certainly crystallized for me, was the echoes between the pairings of men. Older, richer, usually more upper class or higher class man with a poorer, usually more handsome, younger fellow in each of the love triangles. And I don't think I'd focused on them. I was focused more on the female characters. But the more I thought about it and the more the events of this last chunk started to unfold, I became really interested in that. Of course, we had Mr. Grey and George Vavasor. Class difference, wealth difference, and George flies into a murderous rage when he finds out that the source of the money that he thought was coming from Alice is actually, he's being funded by Mr. Grey, and that he just loses it. And Plantagenet Palliser and Burgo, just blanked on his name, but Burgo, at the end of the story, Lady Glencora pushes her husband to go and help him out, and Burgo refuses to accept his money, so he has to do it in a subterfuge way. So the deceit is, I guess Burgo kind of guesses where it came from, but it's left, it's supposed to be kind of a secret, and as much as he needs money, he can't accept it from his rival. And then in a much more comic way, and the analogy kind of breaks down a little bit here, Mr. Cheesacre and Captain Belfield. The running joke throughout the novel is that Mr. Cheesacre is financing him or lending him money and lending him stuff, and it's a bone of contention, and it's really the only way that Captain Belfield is able to keep body and soul together. I'm just curious about those three financial dependencies where there's kind of a class difference or wealth difference. And in all cases, they're younger and more handsome. Although I guess arguably George is not. It's debatable. I was fascinated by that. I was also interested in how the comic plot kind of infused the rest of the more serious plots by the end. I guess there wasn't really ever any humor in the Vavasor plot absent the Pallisers. When they were all together, there was a lot of humor. I mean, Alice had no sense of humor. Oh no, there was one point that I read today. She was receiving Lady Glencora's letters. She was on her honeymoon receiving letters from Lady Glencora that were just wild, and she could barely suppress a laugh. That's the only time I ever saw Alice think anything was funny in the whole book. Did I miss something? But I don't remember so much humor between Lady Glencora and Alice as there was in this fourth and final chunk. Even between Palliser and his wife and Alice, and even Mr. Grey, that I thought was absent until this final chunk. So I was curious about that. And the last thing that I will say is that as much as I loved it right to the end, I had a lot of problems from a kind of a socio-political modern reader point of view. And I was never completely comfortable with the way that Mr. Grey treated Alice. I think he was a fine man for his day, but this is 2018. But he was a bit of a manipulative prick, I thought, as well. And so I wasn't entirely comfortable with her entering this marriage, and I'm not entirely sure that this is a happy ending for Alice. I think marriage in its day, in that time, and arguably in this time, check back with Kenji in a year from now, see if he has a similar critique of being married to me. It's not. Narrative closure in the 19th century and maybe into the 20th century, I'd like to do more of a serious study of that. The boy always gets the girl and they live happily after, and it's bullshit, and I would never read a modern novel about it. I can kind of hold my nose and still enjoy it, as I very much enjoyed Trollope and many other Victorian novels, but how many times did the narrator tell us that Alice needed to repent of her evil doings, her evil ways, and that made me cringe. What did she do that was evil? There was a lot of neuroticism in her behavior, but evil? I mean, this book, it's not a particularly misogynist novel for its day. It's not, and I'm not saying that it is, but it's crying out for a feminist critique. And so I would just say that this very neat and tidy ending with babies and marriage and her giving up her will and looking to Mr. Grey for guidance, that just made me cringe. So here's the longer quote that I forgot to bring. I will paste it in right here. She was happy, and she was resolute in this, that she would now do all she could to make him happy also. And there must now, she acknowledged, be an end to her pride, to that pride which had hitherto taught her to think that she could more wisely follow her own guidance than that of any other who might claim to guide her. She knew now that she must follow his guidance. She had found her master, as we sometimes say, and laughed to herself with a little inward laughter as she confessed that it was so. She was, from henceforth, altogether in his hands. If he chose to tell her that they were to be married at Michaelmas, or at Christmas, or on Lady Day, they would, of course, be married accordingly. She had taken her fling at having her own will, and she and all her friends had seen what had come of it. She had assumed the command of the ship, and had thrown it upon the rocks, and she felt that she never ought to take the captain's place again. It was well for her that he who was to be captain was one whom she respected as thoroughly as she loved him. So, a fantastic reading experience. I'm looking forward to continuing on with the Palliser novels under... Will I submit to Steve's guidance? Or does that dynamic too cry out for some kind of social political analysis, or just on my own? But yeah, I loved it. And if you weren't reading along and you are considering trying this or other novels, try it on audio while reading the text. It was so rich for me. It was 33 hours, and I probably could have read the novel myself in 20 hours, but slowing down and just sinking into that masterful voice of David Shaw Parker, doing all the characters with their wonderful voices, was just a delight. The book is imprinted that much more deeply in me because I did it that way, and that's how I would do the rest of Trollope. All right, it's been a delight. Thanks again to Steve, and yes, Steve, I can forgive you. Thanks for watching.